Hi, Amelia. Thank you again for taking the time to talk to us today, and congratulations again on your award. Can you talk a little bit about how you first got involved with Mary Shelley and what sort of the initial conversations that you had with the director were?
Yeah, I initially got involved. I think they were still shooting, and the director had been listening to some of my music and to an EP, particularly an EP that I'd written called Visitors, and I think she'd kind of been listening to that while they were shooting. So I think that's kind of, she'd started to consider composers, and then we had a mutual friend in one of the producers, so that the introduction was made, and then I just started kind of working on ideas and demos and sending stuff for them all to listen to, and it just evolved that way, really. And I think that the initial conversations were, about how they wanted to kind of capture the spirit of Mary, and they wanted it to feel not too traditional in the kind of period genre. They wanted it to feel a little bit more contemporary. So we just, and then it was quite a long process before it was actually, my job. It took a while to kind of get there.
Sure, and in terms of the, you mentioned there the sort of the blending between the more traditional approach for a period piece and the more contemporary perhaps aspects of it. What were the sort of, where did you sort of strike the balance, as it were between the two of those?
Yeah, it was tricky, and I think that you just try things, and actually what we realized was the bolder choices that I was making were working really well, and the producers were really enjoying those, and the director really liked those. So once we kind of realized that, we realized that we could push it further and further without it being too jarring. And then of course you just find that line. But the thing I think it was about layering it within, so that whenever there were lots of synths, there were always organic, real instruments as well. So that there was always kind of something grounding to it and something real. And I think that it was more about creating atmosphere, which I found I just prefer using synthetic, synths for that kind of thing. And then the editor had done a kind of temp track, and he'd put some really bold choices on there, and actually seeing them play and seeing them work freed me up, because it went, well, that worked really well, and that's a completely contemporary pop song, or so it just kind of broadened the horizon, broadened all of the options for me.
How did you arrive at some of the vocals in there? I mean, you've got sort of your standard, well, not standard, but your more expected vocals, and then it goes into quite abstract, sort of pitch bending, kind of experimental stuff. How do you arrive at that?
It was, so I knew I wanted to have voice, and a woman and a female voice really early on. I just felt that was quite important. And I had this idea of, when I was little, we used to always sing, songs in the round. And so I wanted to create a round, essentially, that we could sing and that we could layer up. So that was kind of finding that like 4-piece vocal that basically just looped and could interlock, was the first thing. And then when the kind of, as the story goes on and as things start to get a bit more surreal, and as and when she's emotionally kind of, going through a really difficult time and experimenting a bit and kind of pushing boundaries, and also like her creativity kind of awakening. And so then I just wanted to introduce something that was just a bit disorientating and a bit weird and a bit, unsettling. And then also because it's Mary Shelley and it's Gothic, so for me I had to have you go for the choral music. So I thought, well, let's have that single, but let's do a single soprano, and then kind of use that and develop it, so that for the stuff that is, about her nightmares, and you could just make some kind of nightmarish, haunting Gothic sound. And luckily, we used Tori, who was the soprano that we used. She was just really amazing at having a go and just experimenting. So a lot of it was down to her, really. We just kind of said, you know, why don't you try a kind of singing scream almost, and then can you go up and down the scale, and we showed her the sequences, and especially the sequence in Geneva, you know, where it's kind of flicking through time and it's back and forth and it's kind of night and day and it's dreamlike, and it's, so we just kind of played that and just said, why don't you just try and, you know, experiment with different sounds and she was just amazing because she came up with all sorts of brilliant things. And then it was about layering those with synths and we had another vocalist who we found in Dublin, who was a countertenor, and he did the same thing. When we went to Dublin, we got him to kind of do similar, so then we could layer up the lower register and the higher register and layer that with synth, and then it kind of made its own texture, I guess.
And just in terms of, I suppose, finding inspiration in general for music, obviously for film music, but for music in general, what's your sort of process where it, obviously on the one hand you have a picture to score to and you have conversations with a director, but when it's, I suppose, when it's just yourself actually writing, what's your sort of process for finding inspiration and finding ideas to write to?
I think it depends if I'm writing a film score or if I'm doing my own release, you know, writing my own pieces. Then, because if it's for a film, then the inspiration really does come from the visual. But I could just respond to what I'm seeing usually. And I think Mary Shelley was great because there is a kind of a depth of inspiration just in when it was set, and I do love everything Gothic. I've always loved Gothic novels, and I love where I live is very kind of romantic, and the landscape is, you know, very inspiring. So definitely from you know where I'm living, what I'm listening to, and I tend to just I don't know, go through periods of time where I'm quite like a sponge, and I just listen and I listen and I listen, and then I go, and then usually when I'm writing music, I don't listen to anything, and I can't, you know, and I kind of switch off, and it's all, I guess, it's all kind of there in some way. By the time you sit down, it's ready to come out.
What do you listen to? Things we would imagine, but
So much, yeah, all sorts. I mean, I like everything, really. There's nothing that I wouldn't listen to. I've got a very broad kind of taste. But, you know, I listen to lots of film scores, and I listen to a lot of kind of contemporary composers. So lots of, you know, I love Max Richter. You know, the Four Seasons is what I'm listening to, like, obsessively at the moment. I can't stop listening to it. And I love, you know, Hauschka, and I just think there's so many amazing people working at the moment. Niels Fram, Oliver Arnold, Ludovico Einaudi, and there's just so many. I love Michael Nyman. I listen to Michael Nyman a lot. And then I also I love a lot of kind of electronic dance music, and I love lots of classical music, although that's something I'm only just really finding, you know, feeling my way around that world. I listen to a lot of Disney soundtracks at the moment because I've 3 girls, so Moana is always in my head. But yeah, all sorts. I let you know, listen to everything really. I love soul. I love Motown. I love.
I think we kind of picked up on some of those influences as we're talking about Mary Shelley, particularly.
Yeah.
Thinking, you know, it has got that sort of that neoclassical or whatever people want to call it.
Yeah.
Sort of Johannes and Max.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love all of that.
Big fan there as well.
Yeah. I just think it's that layering of using both and kind of just using electronics sometimes to just enhance the beauty of strings, or you know, rather than it being one or the other. I think it's trying to, and I think that's what Johan and those guys do so well.
And I think it works pretty well with Mary Shelley anyway, because you have that sort of juxtaposition of sort of nature and beauty, if you want, sort of traditional, but then also the science and like the electricity, literally electricity, if you want to talk about sort of electronic versions and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a big inspiration, was the kind of amalgamation of those two things, the nature and the purity of Mary, and then also this spark, this electricity, this galvanization, this kind of fascination with, and science in that time was kind of just coming through. But there was also a kind of magic to it then, because it was also new. And so, yeah, I think that was a good kind of jumping off point, was going, well, we've got these two elements, and I wanted the score to have those two elements as well.
Can you tell us a bit about your background, especially the sort of musical background, how you got into music in general, and then how that eventually led to films, which I guess Mum's List first, if I'm right?
Yeah, it was.
Just kind of how musical family? Or?
My parents are quite musical. My mum, plays the piano and loves music, and my dad's a brilliant guitarist. And they both, there was always lots of music around, and I probably listened to music that most children didn't listen to, in a way. I was exposed to some really good music really young. And we always had a piano in the house, so I always played on the piano since I was tiny. And then tried to have lessons, and then the formality of the lessons kind of, ruined it for me, because I was like, well, I've learnt it my own way, and I don't do it like that, and, I do it in this strange way. So then I didn't really enjoy music that much at school, but I did always play the piano, and I loved it, but just separately. And then it was I was doing different things, and I was an actress for a while, and that, I kind of loved film, and I loved that world, and I loved telling stories, and but I knew that I didn't love acting, so it was I was kind of doing the wrong bit, I felt like I was on the wrong side of it, and but it just took a while to kind of work out, and then it was actually through, and then I was also writing some songs, and it was through a friend of mine that they'd done a short film, and they needed somebody to, they couldn't afford to get somebody, but they knew I played piano, so they were like, could you just come up with something on the piano for this film, and I did, and I loved it, and I just loved seeing, music to picture, and it was so brilliant. And so then I did a few commercials. I did one for Orange, and with a little string quartet, and that was the first time that I'd kind of arranged anything. And that was just the biggest thrill ever, was writing something and then seeing amazing musicians play it. So the kind of, the seeds were planted, and then it was just, I guess, a bit of a leap, and I kind of had a deal with Universal as a singer-songwriter. But that, again, it wasn't the right fit, and so I just said to them, well, this is what I would like to do, and they said, well, we could release we could release something that is this. They said, let's hear what you've written, and then I, played them all of this piano music that I had, and then they were like, well, let's just do an EP, and then that was how it kind of started, and then that's how Mum's List came about from that, and then Mary Shelley. So yeah, kind of a bit of a roundabout way, but I think it's what I always wanted to do, if I'm honest, and I just didn't think, because I'm not classically trained, I just didn't think it was an option. I just thought, oh, there's no way I could do that, because you need to be, you need to have been at music school for 6 years, and I think it's only recently really opened up to people like me.
Sure, and it sounds like you'd like to do many more films in the future. It's definitely something you'd like to have another go at, as it were.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's the way that I want to write music, for sure, because I love film and telling stories, and actually being part of something, and the collaboration, because that was the other thing that can be quite hard when you're just writing your own music, is there's not that kind of back and forth and that exciting dialogue that you have when you're kind of doing something together. So I really enjoy being part of something bigger and the music being part of something, and having a purpose in a way, because music, you know, it's something that you love and listen to and it's beautiful, but it's quite nice when it actually functions and it's doing something functional. I find that really satisfying.
Those are all the things that resonate with me as a fan, if you like. You know,
Right.
the music has a purpose rather than just sort of existing for its own sake.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's also great. It's the whole
Yeah.
different thing, of course.
Yeah. Because then it's not about you, and it's not about what you love or what you like. It's actually about what's right for the film or what's right for the picture. And I like that removal of self in a way, because it's not, well, I prefer this and I think this is pretty, but it doesn't work. And there's also it feels like a puzzle, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well, that you're kind of piecing together this big tapestry, and I find it really, just really fulfilling to see it all come together and find the right pieces.
Yeah, on that note, as a puzzle, because we're talking about Mary Shelley, what was your way into that film? Was there a pivotal scene that you thought, if I nail this, I've nailed the film, or do you start at the beginning and sort of work your way through?
No, I kind of picked, I think we identified that we needed to, there were like 3 main themes, I think, that you know, they and me wanted to hear and get right. And I think that was Mary, just her. And then there was a kind of idea of a love theme and the romance of the film and her and Percy, and you wanted it to be this sweeping, proper romantic theme. And then the monster theme, which was essentially the darkness and Frankenstein. So those were the 3 kind of bits that I started with. And then once I had those, we just kind of built around them really. And so I think the first cue I wrote was when Mary and Percy first kiss in the churchyard, and it's kind of quite a big, you know, romantic theme. And then the hardest one to get right was the very first scene where you first see Mary in the graveyard. That was, I mean, I think I was still trying to get that right, like 2 weeks before we recorded the music. I just couldn't, because it was such it was just setting the tone. And then actually once that, I felt that was a really key thing to get right.
That's because I thought it was a really well scored scene, because it starts with her, I think she's writing and scribbling stuff down and sort of running home, and the music follows that really beautifully, what she's
thank
what's
you.
going on screen. So it's really well scored.
Took
scene.
a while to get there.
Yeah.
I think I probably overcomplicated. You know, sometimes you almost overcomplicate things, and actually I remember just then being so frustrated with it and just stripping it completely back to piano and a drum and then pretty much going, and then it works again, and it was like, okay, this works. It just, I think I'd put, you know, too much pressure on it or something.
Just to tackle it a bit, I suppose, was there something that surprised you particularly about working in the film industry and the film music industry as opposed to working as a solo artist? Just thinking specifically about sort of how the industry works and sort of ingrained processes and things like that. Was there something that was particularly surprising?
I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything that was, you know, I guess it's not surprising. I wasn't surprised by it, but it's just different, which is the kind of notes, obviously, which you have to incorporate into what you're doing, and often coming from lots of different people. So that can be quite hard. Whereas, you know, if you're doing something yourself, then you don't really have that. You can just, but so it's just, and again, just knowing that it's not about that people can love a cue or a piece of music, but it simply doesn't work. Or so it's kind of removing any, just not being precious about it. And I think that was the biggest thing that I had to learn on Mum's List, was just like, you just throw it away if it doesn't work. And I think, you know, trying to just keep making the same thing work doesn't. So that was a good kind of lesson. Just start again is actually often the better thing. but yeah, just incorporating lots of different opinions and trying to make them all work without completely watering down what you're doing, I think.
I want to talk about a bit about women in film music.
Mm-hmm.
I think women in Hollywood, and especially film music, it's quite a big topic these days.
Yeah.
We had, Top Rag scoring Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
And there is the Alliance for Female Film Composers.
Mm-hmm.
What's sort of your take on that? Because it's a very male-dominated industry.
Yeah. It is, and it doesn't seem to make sense as to why it would be. In terms of like what the job is and what it entails. It's you'd think that. I don't see for any reason why men would have a advantage in any way. But I think it's more that that's just the way it's been for a long time, and I think that it just takes a long time for that to change. But I think it is changing really fast, actually, which is great. And I think there's a big incentive for people to have female composers. And then I guess the only grey area for me sometimes is, especially when there's a female-centric film, and it's female protagonist, and then there's that. Now it feels very much like, well, we have to have a female composer, and I do agree with that. But then it's to say, well, can male composers not write feminine music? Because then it means that female composers can't write masculine music, and I don't think that there should be a difference really. I think that that there can be female composers who are very, male in the way they write traditionally, or who could do Marvel films, I think that there shouldn't be too much of an emphasis on that, but I think that there absolutely should just be an open playing field, and that everybody should be considered for everything equally. And that's the only way that it's ever really going to be fair, I think.
Because it's even slightly awkward to bring up the topic.
Well, exactly.
Why would we need to talk about this in this day and age? Why is it an issue that someone's scoring a big Marvel movie? What's the big deal about it?
I know, but it is a big deal, I guess. It's still, it is a big deal, and I think it's got to be addressed otherwise. Because I think it is still something like 2% or something, isn't it, of composers are female. So there is an issue, definitely is an imbalance, and it needs to be, it does need to be addressed. But I do feel that things are changing, and that there's definitely an awareness now.
Do you feel it's different with the more pop side of things, like Slow Moving Millie? Because it's not exactly pop music in that sort of way, but female pop artists are much more accepted.
Absolutely. I think that it is. It's a lot more equal, isn't it?
Yes.
But I don't know if it's because of what I was saying before, in that idea of a maestro and that kind of very traditional. Maybe it's just a bit. It's felt unattainable for a lot of people. Maybe. I really don't know. I think that's definitely for me. That it just felt like it was the kind of man in the dicky bow and the conducting, and that's a composer. Not me. So I think that maybe there is a kind of image of that male composer that women don't identify with or don't feel that is, is within reach somehow.
Absolutely. I hope it gets broken. With Pinar and Anne Dudley and Rachel Portman and yourself.
Yeah.
There's hopefully lots of inspirational people out there for the younger generation.
I think there are. I think it's different. And I think also because there's been so many crossovers now of people who are in pop or people who are in, moving over, then that's really inspiring for people to see. They're like, oh, okay, I didn't have to, go and train at the, I didn't get into that place, or I didn't, but that doesn't mean that this is closed off to me. I could still pursue this road, whereas I think before it would have felt that was just a closed door.
Anything lined up? You've just got a young'un, so you probably wanted to spend
I'm going to record another EP next month, so just to kind of start start things going. And it's actually, you know, I'd written a lot of it. I'd written most of it actually before the baby, so it's kind of ready to go. So that's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to doing that. And I think I'm going to work with the orchestrator who I worked with on Mary Shelley, which would be amazing because we had such a, you know, great time on that. So that would be really fun. And then I'm not sure after that.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.